again, everyone. I took a few minutes to watch back the last video, and I'm sorry about its length. I'll try to keep these videos a bit shorter so they're easier for you to manage. I also wanted to reference back to an example from the previous video. So if you recall, near the end of the last video, there was an example involving a Jane Smith, and they had income from different sources, basically. And I wanted to use this video and take it as an opportunity to show you what would happen if we change some of the numbers in that fact pattern. How does the NITP calculation change according to the legislation if the fact pattern was a bit different? Let's take a look. On the screen right now, you should see on the left-hand side of the screen just a copy paste of what's in ITA 3B or paragraph 3B. And in the middle of the screen is where we'll have the fact pattern for the example. And in this example, in 20x1, Jane Smith had employment income of $35,000, rental income of $6,000, taxable capital gains of $8,000, and this is the change. We're changing the allowable capital losses. I believe in the last video, this was $7,000. In this video and this example, we're going to make it $9,000. RRSP contributions are $4,000, and they started a sole proprietorship that had a loss of $9,000. The required. Calculate Jane's NITP for 20x1 using the ordering rules of Section 3. So if you recall the prior example, everything is the same except for the amount of allowable capital loss. It's now $9,000, and I've put the number there in red to help you better see it. To answer this, first, the ordering rules in Section 3 begin with paragraph A, and those rules ask us to take anything from subdivision A, B, or D. And we do have employment income, which is a subdivision A issue of $35,000. And we have rental income, which is property income of $6,000. We could subtotal that, and that would be $41,000. In 3B, we deal with taxable capital gains, which is $8,000. And then we deal with the allowable capital loss, which is $9,000. Now, many of you could be taking a look at this and saying, well, how did they get these numbers? 8,000 subtract 9,000 does not equal 0, right? Should be a negative $1,000. But let's take a look at the wording. In ITA 3B on the left side of the screen, we were asked to determine the amount, if any, by which the total of the taxpayer's taxable capital gains for the year exceeds the amount of their allowable capital losses for the year. And we can see, if we go back to the right side of the screen, that the taxable capital gains does not exceed the allowable capital losses. So if you have to answer the question, by how much do taxable capital gains exceed allowable capital losses, if the taxable capital gains are $8,000 and the allowable capital losses are $9,000, the answer is the taxable capital gains exceed allowable capital losses by 0. It doesn't exceed it at all. And that's what we have here as part of the answer in the question. So 8,000 subtract 9,000, we're going to write 0 because it does not exceed. We will keep track of that negative $1,000, and I'll show you where that is later. Let's continue on. We can subtotal all of these items. It's 41,000. And then in 3C, we see by what are our subdivision E deductions. And the subtotal from 3A and 3B, which was 41,000, exceeds the subdivision E deductions by $37,000. Then in 3D, we can subtract any losses from employment, business, or other, and we have a $9,000 loss from the proprietorship. And so our final answer will be 3E NITP is 28,000. You would note down somewhere that you have something called a net capital loss carryover of $1,000. So this 8,000 that I'll highlight in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen relates to the taxable capital gains, and the 9,000 relates to the allowable capital losses. This is a net capital loss carryover. Net meaning we took our capital items, taxable capital gain and allowable capital loss, and we subtracted one from the other. So the nature of the loss, it is capital in nature, and it's a carryover, meaning we can use it in another tax year, but not necessarily in this tax year. So we'll keep track of that in a T account or somewhere else. And in a later video and a later chapter, we'll spend a lot more time talking about carryovers and where they are in the Tax Act and how they apply to various tax years. But for now, just know that if 3B results in a negative, that in the NITP calculation, you should be writing down a 0, and you should be keeping track of that negative somewhere else, maybe the way I did it just now on the screen. You could just put it down, net capital loss carryover of whatever it is. Now let's change the example slightly just one more time. So I'll reset the allowable capital loss to whatever it was in the last video. I think it was 7,000. We'll reset that and we'll change a different number and we'll see how things look differently. So let's take another look at the example. In 20X1, Jane Smith had employment income of 35,000, rental income of 6,000, taxable capital gains of 8,000, allowable capital losses of 7,000, so that's been reset to 7,000, RRSP contributions of 4,000, and started a sole proprietorship that had a loss of 40,000. Maybe Jane's... So to have employment income of 35,000, but a business loss of 40,000 for a proprietorship, Jane must really believe in this business. But anyway, the required is once again to calculate Jane's NITP for 20X1 using the ordering rules of section 3. So you'll see that the beginning is what we've done before. In 3A, we'll list subdivision A items, employment income, then any subdivision B items. In this case, we have property income. You would also list any subdivision D, other income items, but we don't have any. So we can go on to 3B. And in 3B, we have our taxable capital gains, subtract our allowable capital losses. And in this instance, 3B, the taxable capital gains, does exceed the allowable capital losses, and it exceeds it by $1,000. We can subtotal 3A and 3B, and we get $42,000. And then in 3C, we look to see what deductions are available to the taxpayer as per subdivision E. And in this example, we have the RRSP contributions of 4,000. So in 3C, the prior subtotal of $42,000 exceeds the subdivision E deductions of 4,000, and it exceeds it by a total of 38,000. Then in 3D, we are to subtract our losses, and here's the new item. In subdivision B, we have a business loss of $40,000. Now let's take a look at the legislation on the left. I've got ITA 3E there. It says where an amount is determined under paragraph D for the year in respect of the taxpayer's income for the year is the amount so determined. However, we know that this amount will not be positive, whatever is going to be determined there. So in any other case, the taxpayer shall be deemed to have income for the year in an amount equal to 0. So this would be such a case where the result in 3C does not exceed the losses here in 3D. So we have NITP is equal to 0 as per 3F. And notice that difference there. In prior examples, I would have put a 3E there. E is an echo. Now, what about this math? 38,000 subtract 40,000 does not equal 0, right? It equals a negative 2,000. What do we do with that negative 2,000? Well, we have a loss, and that loss is non-capital in nature, right? Capital losses would occur up in 3B. This loss here occurred not in 3B, elsewhere, so it is not capital in nature. So we would say we have a non-capital loss carryover of $2,000. And that is 38,000 subtract 40,000 results in 2,000. Okay, I realize that these calculations might not seem all that straightforward. There are definitely some rules you need to learn and get used to, but keep practicing and eventually it'll make sense. So until next time, thanks for watching.